Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to COABE's webinar today on May 10th. Our mission is to inspire educators so adults succeed and communities thrive. This webinar today is going to be on TABE 11/12 and TASC high school equivalency updates and overviews. We want to just make mention of a few things that are going on right now at COABE. We just released our prison literacy edition of the COABE Journal, and we're now accepting article submissions for the next edition, which is going to be on leadership. So you can go to coabe.org and submit your articles there. We offer 50 webinars, over 50 webinars, including our Manager Mondays. And we have garnered over 18,000 participants nationwide. So thank you so much for participating in our webinars, everyone who's out there. With our Educate and Elevate campaign, we were able to stave off a lot of funding, $156 million in proposed cuts to adult education. And we've also gotten in touch with over 100 new legislators in the House. Legislators do need to hear from you, and 3 clicks is all it takes. So if you have a chance to visit this website and take action, that would be amazing, and we would appreciate it so much. Submit your success stories at that same website, educateandelevate.org, to recognize adult learners, workforce partners, and state innovators. We are a convener of partners. We have 42 national partners, including Amazon, Napa, Skills USA, Google, Tyson Foods, just to name a few. We have 47 state partners, and we have 23,000 active members and 65,000 plus contacts. So our organization is growing steadily every year. So we have some new workforce partners: Marriott, Tyson, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Skills USA, Amazon, Google, and Alliance. This is really exciting. We're developing really great relationships with these workforce partners, and we look forward to working with them throughout the year. We have Minds That Move Us, a Minds That Move Us Adult Career Pathway Festival that's going to be in Miami, August 6th through the 8th. And Google and COABE are actually starting to host and facilitate Google boot camps. If you want to find more out about this, please go to educateandelevate.org and then /Google, and you can share your adult learner success stories there. You can sign up to be a Google trainer. You can access information on free Google boot camps at your state conference, and you can also take a survey. I actually just completed facilitating our first Google boot camp here in Maryland, and it was great. So thank you to everyone who came for that this morning at the state conference if you're on this webinar. And I think last but not least, save the date for COABE 2020 in Baltimore, Maryland. Today's webinar presenter is Mike Johnson, and at this point, I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Liz. And I'll go ahead and share my desktop real quick here.
Yes, thank you.
Make sure that it pops up for everybody.
Yep, it's loading now. There you go.
Okay. And just a quick review of DRC and our background in assessment. DRC is a national assessment provider with offices. Our office is based outside of Minneapolis, but we've not only published the TABE and TASC assessment, but also 22 state summative contracts, as well as the WIDA consortium. We're the technical provider for their platform for assessments for the WIDA consortium for the ELL learners in 39 states, as well as our Terra Nova and Lost Link assessments for K-12 providers. Many programs are aware that TASC and TABE and Lost Links and Terra Nova were formerly McGraw-Hill assessments, and those products were acquired by DRC back in July of 2015. I'm going to talk a little bit about TASC initially, and then we'll switch to TABE 11 and 12. TASC is our high school equivalency assessment that is approved for use in 15 states across the country. Those 15 states are highlighted on the map. As we go forward and look at different states, the map does change periodically. Different states have requests for proposals that do come out at different times, and so we certainly do respond to those proposals. We do have exclusive states, and we do have competitive states. New York, West Virginia, Indiana use TASC exclusively. They have used TASC exclusively since 2014 and have renewed their contracts a few times during that period of time. So we're very happy to have those 3 exclusive contracts. And then Illinois, New Jersey, Wisconsin, Michigan, and other states that have all tests approved. South Carolina has just GED and TASC approved. So a lot of states have different combinations of assessments, and I'm sure everybody's aware of what their states use. Just real quick, for those that are not familiar with TASC too deeply, is our high school equivalency assessment that does comprise 5 parts: reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. It is available on computer and paper. The computer platform is delivered on our Insight testing platform, which is the same platform that we use for all assessments within DRC, including TABE Online. So if programs are using TABE Online, they're already set up as task test centers in theory, because they're using the same platform. Looking at the standards and the frameworks, college and career readiness is always the big buzzword for adult education, but college and career readiness only really ties to English language arts and math. For science and social studies, we look at the next generation science standards. And for social studies, we looked at a framework of 12 comprising 12 state standards to make up our social studies standards. Each of these standards or these frameworks are broken into blueprints. And so these blueprints are deeper dives into the content themselves. So if we look at reading, writing, math, science, and social studies, those are broken out into the depth of knowledge percentages and how we divide the items. In the early days of TASC, back in the 2014 and 15, this is where TASC was different than other high school assessments, because we were transitioning from depth of knowledge 1 and 2 to a depth of knowledge 2 and 3. So different types of questions still aligning to the same standards. So today, in 2019, we're at depth of knowledge 2 and 3 for the majority of the assessment, and we've been that way for the last few years. We do have testing times that are standard for all of our assessments for TASC. So each of the forms have the standard testing times, and I think these are relatively standard for all high school equivalency tests, within a few minutes of each other. And you'll notice that math has a calculator and a non-calculator portion for that. The math portion does use a scientific calculator. We do provide a list of scientific calculators that are approved for use on our website, tasktest.com. There are a number of different items that are used on TASC. Test items, different types of questions. The selected response, which are the multiple choice types of questions, are used by and large for the majority of the test. But there is obviously the writing prompt. We still do have an essay included for TASC. We do use gridded response questions for math. We have technology-enabled questions on the computer-based test, where students are dragging and dropping or matching or using multiple select. And then also we have twin items when doing a paper pencil test to align to those technology-enhanced questions that you can't do with a paper and pencil. So we can look at some of those examples a little bit later on when we go through some of the TABE examples, because we use the same types of items in TABE as well. The item count of these item counts are available on our website. You'll notice a gridded response in the middle is only used on our math portion. Technology-enabled items, I do notice a typo there, and I apologize for that. It's not 44 technology-enabled items on social studies, just 4 of them. So just an introduction to those technology-enabled items, and then the extended response item on the writing portion of the test. TASC does have its own passing score for each content area. The passing score is 500. Our scale is 300 to 500, and it is a proprietary scale. We do also offer a secondary passing score. We call it our Distinguished Achievement Score for reading language arts and math, and that is 580 for reading, 560 for math and writing. And so we do have that secondary cut score that is available for TASC. You do need to have at least a 500 in each of the content areas to have a passing score for that. You cannot average your scores. So you cannot have a 600 in reading and a 400 in math and average that together to be a 500. I also have time for questions for TASC at the end. I encourage you to use the chat feature in the Zoom chat feature to ask any questions related to TASC. I am going to switch over to our TABE 11 and 12 and talk about TABE 11 and 12 a little bit more in depth. TABE 11 and 12, just like TASC, is aligning to the National College of Career Readiness Standards. We have new lengths of TABE, and length is defined in several different ways. We'll talk about it in a couple of different ways. Length of the test, number of questions. That number of questions has changed for TABE, but also the versions of the test. TABE 9 and 10 had a survey and a complete battery version, which was a short and a long version. TABE 11 and 12 just has one version of the test, just TABE 11 and 12. Math also changes for TABE 11 and 12 to just be a single test. No longer is there a separate computation test or a separate applied test like there was with TABE 9 and 10. TABE 11 and 12 just has a math test, and there is computation skills, there are applied skills, but they're within the same math test. There is a part of the test that's for a calculator, and we'll talk about that, but it's not a separate test. We've also improved our locator by adding 4 questions to the locator to improve the predictions that in placing a student into one of the levels of TABE. The locator is a short placement test. We wanted to make sure it's as predictable as possible because many programs using TABE Online use the automatic locator. So we want to make sure that that has as predictive placement tool as possible. And by adding 4 more questions into that, we do strengthen that prediction. Another area within TABE 11 and 12 that has a change is in the content. The College and Career Readiness Standards main content areas are reading, math, and language. If you're familiar with TABE 9 and 10, you knew that there was a language mechanics, a spelling, and a vocabulary content areas. Those were not part of the federally approved portions of TABE 9 and 10, but they were within every test booklet. And we have now combined those areas into the language portion based on the standards, the new College and Career Readiness Standards. I'll talk a little bit more about our alignment to TASC and other high school equivalency exams as we get a little further along in the presentation, but we're doing some studies to correlate those scores as well. TABE 11 and 12 is very familiar or very similar to TABE 9 and 10 in a lot of different ways. One of those is in the foundation. We still do have a locator test. We still offer 2 alternate forms, 11 and 12. And there still are 5 levels of 11 and 12 that are approved for federal reporting. So there are 5 levels of reading, 5 levels of math, and 5 levels of language that students could have the possibility of progressing through. Those levels are L, E, M, D, and A, same as they were with 9 and 10. All those levels have received full 7-year NRS approval. There is no conditional approvals tied to any of the levels or any of the content areas within TABE 11 and 12. Digging a little deeper into the math portion of TABE 11 and 12, math covers much more of an emphasis on applied skills. The applied skills do incorporate computation, but as I mentioned earlier, there is no separate computation test for TABE 11 and 12. So where there is computation, there is also how to apply those computation skills in an applied framework. And so we see much more of an emphasis on applied skills. And as I mentioned in language, we see now the incorporation in the middle bullet point of spelling and some of the mechanics skills that were separate in TABE 9 and 10, and now because of the change in standards, get introduced into the language portion. Just to show you a quick example of a sample question, and I will show you a few more sample questions as we go forward. This happens to be a TABE 9 and 10 set of sample questions on the left-hand side of the screen. from our level M applied math portion of the test. And it is a cable TV statement, monthly statement, that includes an installation fee and a monthly charge, and then a set of questions related to that statement. And these questions are all multiple choice questions related to that statement. If we look at how that changes to TABE 11 and 12, also at level M, we see much more of an increase on the rigor. This one is calculating area in a simplest form based on fractions. On the first question, the second question is having two boys that are mowing lawns and using an equation to represent a number of lawns that one of the boys had mowed. So that is a straight algebra question solving for X at level M. So again, noticing that the standards have increased in their rigor, allowing the test questions to follow in that level of rigor as well. To emphasize that change in the content or the change in the standards, I have on the top of the screen the old NRS descriptor. This is what TABE 9 and 10 was aligned to in the blue box. And it says an individual has little or no recognition of numbers or simple counting skills, or may only have minimal skills such as the ability to add or subtract single-digit numbers. Essentially, and this is the math level 1 descriptor. If a student made a gain on this sentence with TABE 9 and 10 level E, they showed a gain in the federal NRS system. Under the new descriptor, which is in the orange portion of the screen, it becomes much more rigorous, much more descriptive. There are now 5 paragraphs instead of 1 sentence that is published by the Department of Education. Those 5 paragraphs, in paragraph number 3, you'll notice that it says algebraic thinking. Students prepared to exit this level understand and apply the properties of operation to addition and subtraction problems. So it says similar things to that very first sentence, but there also is much more emphasis on the descriptive words that I've highlighted in red. Those descriptive words are use your understanding, explain their reasoning, apply and understand and apply, analyze and compare, create composite shapes, organize, represent, and interpret. So then those areas are also then required by us, the test publisher, to incorporate into the test questions that we use to measure these descriptors. So, you know, whether this descriptor in the blue box drove what TABE 9 and 10 test items look like, the descriptor in the orange box drives what TABE 11 and 12 test questions look like. And again, this is the NRS level 1 math descriptor. Each of the 6 levels of math, 6 levels of reading, and the 6 levels of language all are as descriptive, all have 6+ paragraphs of detail from the U.S. Department of Education. One other area that has not changed much with TABE 11 and 12 is the foundation or the flow that a student would progress through your program. In the top left, they would enter into your program. They would, under our recommendations, take the Locator test, take a pre-test, be placed into an instructional program. From that instructional program, take a post-test. They may be ready to exit. They may go back for some more instruction and some more growth in your program. But what the goal of the Department of Education with the new descriptors and the new emphasis on college and career readiness is that when a student is in that bottom right corner and they are ready to exit, yes, the majority of students may exit directly to a high school equivalency track, but they are better prepared to succeed at that high school equivalency track, but they are also better prepared to succeed directly to a career workforce program, to be eligible for a career and workforce program, or to be placed in a post-secondary placement program. And we'll talk about some correlation studies that we're working on as well for college placement with TABE 11 and 12 as we move forward. Some other areas of change for TABE 11 and 12 are the types of items, and we saw this on TASC on an earlier screen, is that we do have new types of questions. We have in the first column in the blue heading is EBSR, which stands for Evidence-Based Selected Response. Evidence-Based Selected Response is just scientific way of saying a two-part reading question. You'll notice that those EBSR are only under the reading section on this chart. And there's a few of them on level E, but quite a few of them on level A. Two-part reading questions are worth 2 points. So now we also have a change in the types of scoring that we use for TABE. We no longer have 1 point for one question. Some of the questions are worth 2 points. So now we also have to discuss how to change our scoring for TABE, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. But we have new types of reading questions. In the middle column, we have technology-enabled items. Like we saw that with TABE, a TASC as well. Just a handful of questions in the middle for math and reading. A few more of them on language. If your program does the language test, you might, and you're using TABE Online, you might see a student dragging and dropping words into sentences or sentences into paragraphs. And so we have more of an ability to use those technology-based items in the language test. Total number of questions for TABE, 40 questions for math and language, 47 questions for reading. There are more reading standards from the College and Career Readiness standards to address questions to address those standards. We'll talk about time in a second, but I'm going to jump over to our website real quick, tabetest.com. And on our website at tabetest.com, at the very top of the screen, there is a resource tab. Under the resource tab, you can click on the TABE 11 and 12 resources, and there is a list of resources that are available. If you'd like to compare TABE to other NRS approved assessments, there's a comparison chart that's posted there. We have some webinars that we record. We have a Thursday monthly webinar. The third Thursday of every month, we host a webinar and we record them and post them there. But what I'm going to show you is a little bit farther down, we have some practice items. These are printable PDF practice tests for TABE 11 and 12. And I'll go down and open up the Level M sample test. The Level M sample test for math starts out with a new type of question. It's a gridded response question. And the question asks, look at the expression 10 plus x divided by 2, and it asks you to evaluate the expression x equaling 4. So 10 plus 4 divided by 2, the answer is 12, but you're not provided with a multiple choice of A, B, C, and D. You're provided with a grid of bubbles, and you have to provide the answer versus selecting the answer. So that allows us to raise the depth of knowledge of this type of question over the normal selected response or multiple choice question. On these gridded response questions, the student would bubble in the 1 and the 2 on the grid. They can do that from the left justification or the right justification. If you're scanning your answer sheets, it would be picked up by the scanner either way. So those are sample questions. If we scroll all the way to the end of this PDF file, there is an answer key at the end of every practice test. So if you're handing this out to students, just make sure that you keep a copy, take off the last page before you hand it out to the students, because there is an answer key at the end of every sample. I'm going to also open up real quick to show you a couple of reading sample questions. I'll open up the level A reading sample. It starts out with a reading passage. The reading passage is a 6-paragraph passage about buying local. Last paragraph is a 1-sentence paragraph, so it's a fairly short paragraph. Question number 1, and I'll blow this up a little bit, hopefully make it a little easier to see. It says, read the sentence from paragraph 4. Both wages and taxes contribute to the health and welfare of the community as a whole. Which key idea does the sentence support? And it's a multiple choice question, and the student can select the correct answer. If I scroll down, and we'll skip over number 2, but we'll go to question number 3. Question number 3, it has a part A, and it says, how does the author provide effective support to the main idea of the article? And it is a multiple choice question. But part B then asks which detail from the article best supports the answer to part A. That's the evidence-based selected response question. A 2-part question worth 2 possible points. If the student gets part A and B correct, they get 2 points for question number 3. If they get part A correct and part B incorrect, they would receive 1 point for question number 3. If they get part A incorrect and part B correct, they would receive 0 points. You cannot get the evidence correct without getting the main idea correct. So I can get 0, 1, or 2 points possible on the evidence-based selected response questions. And there are several different types of evidence-based selected response types, so there are a lot of examples of those that are included in the handouts for the practice tests that are available. Again, those are under the resource tab, and they're available for all levels of TABE. I'm going to jump back to our PowerPoint real quick and talk about the testing times. I know testing times, people have some concerns over there, so we have some good information on the testing times. Testing time for TABE 11 and 12 have changed based on TABE 9 and 10. TABE 9 and 10, the testing times were based on a requirement of time. TABE 11 and 12, we changed that to allowable time. So we provide more time than the average student would need for the test. And we did that from our research team based on the change in standards, based on the unknown factor of when every state was going to convert to the new standards, when each classroom and each teacher was going to expose students to the new standards. So we wanted to make sure students were not at a disadvantage being exposed to new standards, and we wanted to make sure that they had enough time for the test. We have, last July, we reduced our allowable time with the U.S. Department of Education. We are also monitoring the times for the test continually and preparing some reductions again for the times as well. Currently today, for reading, there are 2 parts to the test. Each part is allowed 60 minutes of time. Students are spending between 40 and 45 minutes on each section, so they're finishing well ahead of the allowed time on that. Same thing with language, allowed 60 minutes. Most students finish within 35 minutes or so on the language portion. And with math, the students are allowed 75 minutes for 2 parts, and they're finishing right around 45 minutes on the math test. The 2 different parts on reading, part 1 and part 2, are just simply a built-in break between 2 halves of the question. So 45 questions, right in the middle of the questions, there's a built-in break for students. Some programs may not have the time to deliver both parts in succession, and that's okay. That break can be a few minutes. That break can be a few hours. If you're a smaller program that only meets 1 day a week, and you can only do part 1 of the reading test this week, you can deliver part 2 of the reading test next week. The important part to remember is not to give a reading homework assignment in between those 2 parts of the assessment. You don't want to have instruction changing the outcome of part 2 of the assessment. With math, there is a difference between part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is the calculator portion of the test. So we'll notice that there is no calculator used on level L or level E. There is a calculator on level M, D, and A. That calculator on level M is a standard 4-function calculator. On levels D and A, it's a scientific calculator. So again, there is a difference in the calculator, 4-function for level M, scientific for levels D and A. I mentioned that we are looking at reducing our times. Here's a preview of that. This is under review. This is not yet in place. We do anticipate having this in place for July 1 for the start of the program year. This is research based on just over a million tests taken in the last year for TABE 11 and 12. So again, on the previous screen, the allowable time was 120 minutes for reading. We're recommending lowering that to 90 minutes for the 2 parts because of that average time being between 75 and 80 minutes. For language, we're recommending lowering from 60 minutes to 50 minutes because the average time is right consistent between 35 and 40 minutes. And then for math, I have it listed at 60 minutes. It may end up being 65. They're still reviewing that with our psychometricians, but the average time is right around 40 to 45 minutes. We also are reducing the locator times down, so taking some time off the locator and allowing that to be completed in a shorter time frame. What the average times over the last year have told us is that the average time for TABE 11 and 12 is very similar to the total time that has been taken for the TABE Complete Battery for 9 and 10. So for those programs that did use the longer form for TABE 9 and 10, TABE 11 and 12 is very similar in the time frame for that. For those programs that use TABE Survey, that there is a difference in time based on TABE 11 and 12. Again, these under review time changes are pending approval from the U.S. Department of Ed, and once we have that approval, we'll make that formal announcement. Some resources that are available for teachers that are also posted on our website are the TABE 11 and 12 blueprints. This blueprint that we have on the screen is for the TABE level math blueprint, and the math blueprint for level A is made up of 5 domains from the College of Career Readiness Standards. Each of those domains are color-coded. The yellow one is geometry. If I scroll down on this handout, and I'll show you this handout in a full format in a minute, but I'll switch the screen, that geometry is broken into more detail and more descriptions under each one. The left-hand side of the screen is made up of the numbering sequences for the standards, but the middle is the standard description. And I'll focus on the descriptions, and the far right-hand column, the emphasis level that description has on that level of TABE. And remember, this is the blueprint for level A of TABE for math. So this first description says no precise definitions of angle, circle, perpendicular line, parallel line, and line segment based on undefined notions of point, line, distance along a line, and distance around a circular arc. That's the description. We'll notice that is a low emphasis. It is a low emphasis on level A of TABE, specifically because those first couple of words, no precise definitions. Knowing the definition would not be a key target for level A of TABE, which is the highest level of TABE. It would be a skill at the lower levels of TABE. And I'll compare that to the third one down that says use volume formulas for cylinders, pyramids, cones, and spheres to solve problems. That's a high emphasis for TABE 11 and 12 at level A. We might see these same 2 descriptions on level D or level M of TABE, but at different levels of emphasis based on what level of TABE we're looking at. So if I'm a math teacher, it would be helpful to have all the blueprints available to me to review where those emphasis levels are stressed the most on each area. These blueprints, and I'm going to jump back to our website just real quick to show you, under our resource tab, under TABE 11 and 12, there is a link right to the blueprints. So the blueprints are available for every level and form of TABE. So here we have math level A, the one we are looking at, and I'll open up that in the full form. And I'll scroll down on that so we can see that geometry was the first color, and then we'll move on to number and quantity, and then to algebra is a longer section of level A of TABE, and then finish up with functions, and the last one is statistics and probability. So this 3-page PDF can be printed, can be saved. We also share these blueprints with our test publishing partners, with our content partners, so that they can align their curriculum to the emphasis levels of TABE as well, so they have that same information. Jump back to the presentation real quick. So switching to the test delivery modes, we talked about paper and pencil is still available. Hand scoring is still an option. We'll talk about machine scoring in a moment, but online testing is certainly increasing over the last several years. With DRC, we do all of our computer-based testing through our Insight platform. That Insight platform runs on any operating system. Last school year, it was 45 million tests delivered. This school year, we just finished the counts. It was 54 million tests delivered on our Insight platform across all assessments within DRC. We are working to move TABE Class E to our Insight platform for our ESL adult learners, so that will be happening later this year. If you're in one of the states that use TABE Class E for ESL learners, you can anticipate that a little bit later this year. For computer-based testing, a few of the differences are that students are no longer directly proctored or do not have to be directly proctored with the computer lab. And I will show you from our website, there is a tutorial available to show the students how to take a test. Again, under the resource tab at the very top of the screen, directly on the resource tab, there's a link for online tools training. That online tools training allows you or a student at any time to go out and interact and use a tutorial for the TABE Insight testing platform as a student. So there's a couple of direction pieces here, and there's a link at the bottom to click here, and I can go ahead and click that link. And from this step forward, it's as if I'm a student taking a test in our Insight platform. So this is the screen that a student would normally see when they log in to take a test. It's missing a box right below where it says online tools. It would normally say log in. We've hidden that, so now they can only have the choice to log into the tutorial, and I'll go ahead and do that. There's a tutorial for TABE 9 and 10. There's tutorials for TABE 11 and 12, reading at all levels. Under reading, there's also a tutorial for our audio. TABE 11 and 12 supports text-to-speech for students that have that accommodation requirement, so you can try that tutorial out with text-to-speech, but I'll do that with a standard version. We do ask the students to log in just as they would in a standard test, but we provide the login information right above the box where it's required. So I'll type that in here real quick and go ahead and get connected. And from this point forward, the student is working themselves through the test directions and getting started on the test. So they're welcomed into the testing system where they were registered. If they had an ID number when they were registered, that's collected. What test are they have been assigned? And so far, it's only the reading tutorial that I've been assigned. And then they can be given directions based on the test that they've been assigned. And since I've been assigned the tutorial, I'm getting directions based on the online tools training. So a couple of directions on the help button, a couple of directions on the pointer in the flag feature, how to move forward and backwards, and then how to use the sticky notes, and we'll talk about that, some of the utilities. And then the last one is our computer check. If you see 3 circles, your computer is operating correctly, and you can go ahead and continue with the test. From that standpoint, the student is in the testing window. They see that same essay that we showed you earlier in the PDF format of buying local, the same question of read the sentence from paragraph 4, and now they're seeing how to answer that in a computer-based fashion. If I want to use some of the 2 utilities at the top, I could click on the highlighter and highlight certain parts of the essay if I need to. If I wanted to use some test-taking strategy and eliminate answers that I know are wrong, I can go down to a 50-50 and select that answer there. I could also use a magnifying glass and increase the font size on a specific, maybe more on a math question, on a graph. If I wanted to look at that, I could do that. If I wanted help reading line by line, I can use a line guide and pull down a line guide to go line by line. If this was a math test and we had the ability to use the calculator would be another utility out to the right-hand side for that. So we would have that utility out to the right. I'll go ahead and page forward to question number 3. We saw this question on the paper format. How does the author provide effective support for the main idea? That was that multiple choice question. And then part B, which detail from the article best supports the answer to part A? Up in the top left corner, there's a number bar that lets me jump around to different questions. I'm going to move ahead right to question number 6. Question 6 is a gridded response question. I'm sorry, not a gridded, is another evidence-based selected response. It says, which statement represents a claim made by the author in paragraph 5? So I could scroll down and reread paragraph 5 if I didn't read it yet and make my answer. But then on the next part B of that, it says, which 2 details from the article best support the answer to part A? So it's asking me to select 2 parts. If I tried to select a third part, it would bring up an error message that says you've reached the maximum. But you'll notice that my option in this paragraph is a 4-sentence paragraph. If we would take it back to the PDF practice items, there are 4 sentences. So this multiple select technology-enabled item could also be a multiple choice item in a paper and pencil. So we can turn technology-enabled items into traditional multiple select items as well for paper and pencil. When we get to the very end, and I'll flag a question there, but I'll get to the end, and I'm brought up to a review screen that will tell the student that you've answered certain questions, you've left certain questions blank, you've marked certain questions for review, so I can go ahead and select any of those boxes and go back to that question. So this tutorial is available for any student. I know there are programs that send this link out to students when they register. If some programs register through an email list, and if they have an email list for students, they send this out ahead of time, telling the students when you arrive, you're going to be taking an assessment on a computer. If you want to get familiar with it, here's a link to practice. And so they let them have that practice link available for that. Again, this is available on tabetest.com under our online tools training that you can access anytime. Going back to our PowerPoint, I'm going to pull that up real quick here and move over to our paper and pencil testing. Paper and pencil testing is still an option. If you are going to use paper and pencil, we encourage you to scan your answer sheets. Scanning has changed for TABE 11 and 12. We no longer use software and Scantron OMR scanners to scan TABE 11 and 12. We have switched to a web portal, and we use image-based scanners. Image-based scanners are much more affordable for programs. A lot of programs chose to hand score their answer sheets with TABE 9 and 10 simply because of the cost. A Scantron scanner typically costs between $4,000 and $5,000. Our test-made software was about $3,500. Scantron would typically charge you an annual support fee, so it could be a $10,000 investment to scan an answer sheet for TABE 9 and 10. Under TABE 11 and 12, we've changed to image-based scanners. The very first scanner listed on the list is available for $199 on Amazon or Staples website. So very affordable. There is no software to purchase. There is no additional fee to scan, just that you have to use a compatible scanner, a compatible image-based scanner. And the 3 main requirements, and here's some sample scanners, but the 3 main requirements are that it's a dual read, continuous feed, Twain compliant scanner. Dual read means that it reads both sides of the page when it goes through the scanner. Continuous feed basically means that it's not a flatbed scanner. It's a scanner that looks more like a fax machine, that you're feeding documents to the top and they scan through it. And Twain compliant simply means that that scanner can connect to the internet directly. So it's going to connect directly to our portal to communicate. That's a little bit different than your office copy machine, because your office copy machines will scan a document and then send it to you as an attachment or post it to a network drive. That's technically Twain compliant, so we are working on that as an enhancement. But your cell phone, if you think about your cell phone and your bank accounts today, when you take a picture of a check to deposit in your checking account, that photo of that check goes directly in your account. You do not attach it to your account. You just take a photo of it when you're in your account and it deposits it in your account. That's how Twain compliant scanners work as well. You scan a TABE answer sheet, it goes directly into your portal TABE account and is scored and reported that way. So as long as we have a Twain compliant scanner, and you may already have a Twain compliant scanner for other uses, it will work with TABE 11 and 12. Another key important piece of the scanner is that if you are scanning your TABE answer sheets, all that data goes into the same database that we use for TABE Online. So now we can compile that data and start sharing it back to the programs. And we'll start talking about that a little bit in a few more slides. Once we have all that data together, we can also report that out to programs. Typically, we do that with individual reports. The key report that most programs use is an individual profile report. There is also an individual portfolio report. The difference between the two is a portfolio is a collection or a summary of tests over time. So if I was a student and I tested in January, July, and October, I would run a portfolio report for that student to see all three of those occurrences. If I wanted to see the details of one of those occurrences, I would run the profile report. We also have a locator report for the programs that want to run a report based on the locator results. We have the option to send a data file to state organizations as a bulk export. A newer report that's available in our system today is a roster report based on our test sessions. So if you're using TABE Online, you can get a roster of all the students that were in one session together to get a summary of that. Similar to an individual portfolio, but as a group of a roster. And local programs also now have the capability of exporting out their own data to Excel through a local exporting tool. We've made some updates to our diagnostic reports. The first update has taken effect just a week or so ago. I'm going to ask you to ignore the purple colors. The purple colors were put in there by our marketing team, but were not yet adopted by the IT team. So don't think that this is a new report. The report still is the same if you're using TABE or the scanning, but the colors have changed a little here on this sample. But this is a report for a student called Mike Johnson up in the top left corner. He took TABE 11 back on January 12th, took reading, math, and language on the 11th and the 12th, took reading level A, math level M, and reading and language level A. On reading, there was 56 total points. Remember, some of those questions are worth 2 points. This student obtained 40 of the 56 points. And that gets us a scale score and an NRS level that we can report into a state data system. Down below in the bottom, the left-hand side of the page on the bottom is the blueprint that we saw earlier, the pie chart. For level A of TABE, there are 3 parts of the pie: key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration and knowledge ideas. There's 18 questions on level A of TABE related to key ideas and details. Just last week, and I apologize for not having this updated with the numbers, we added this 2 columns now that will tell you the points possible on key ideas and details. Let's say that out of those 18 questions, 4 of them were 2 points. So there was 22 points possible, and this student obtained 15 of those points. So they have partial proficiency of that subdomain. So we have a little bit more detail on page 1 of the report. This is an update that has been released as phase 1. Phase 2 of the report is going to be updated a little bit later this summer, and it is to page 2 of the report. Page 2 of the report is also the left-hand side is the blueprint, key ideas and details again, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas. But on the right-hand side, today, the right-hand side ends with the skill column. Here are the skills that go into key ideas and details. This is not specific to Mike Johnson, the student. It's specific to level A of TABE. Later this summer, when we add the box in red, the needs improvement, this page 2 report will become specific to Mike Johnson, the student. So Mike Johnson took level A of TABE under key ideas and details. He does have skills in drawing inferences in text. He has skill in summarizing and describing relationships between events, but he needs improvement in identifying main ideas and supporting main ideas. So these are the areas that I can have detailed instruction on. Same thing down in the math portion. You can see that I understand fractions pretty well, but I need help in decimals. So I have much more of a detailed overview. And again, this update will be posted a little bit later this summer, and we'll have more updates as that becomes closer for that. Another announcement that we had at the COABE conference this year was our partnership with Literacy Pro. If you're one of the 18 states that uses the LACES data system, starting on July 1st, we will start transferring data into LACES on a nightly basis automatically. So you will not need to hand enter TABE data into the LACES data system starting July 1st. We've started to do that on a pilot basis with several states, but system-wide with the Literacy Pro system on July 1st, we'll start implementing that data. So again, if you're in a state that uses LACES, know that starting on July 1st, we'll be integrating data more closely with that. For states that have their own proprietary system, we have started that as well. I know in Michigan, we've started working with the mayor's database system. We are also working in Illinois with the DAISY system. So we are taking steps. Working with LACES, it was easy to work with 18 states at once, and now we're going back and working with those individual states as well. So you have a way to reduce some of the hand entering of data into the system. As I mentioned, we do have a couple of correlation studies that are underway. We have a college placement correlation study where we've been asked by several states and several college systems to update some older correlation studies that were available to correlate TABE to college placement assessments, specifically AccuPlacer and ACT. So we are in the data collection period of that and doing some updating of some previously done correlations that were posted. If you have ever done a Google search for TABE to AccuPlacer or TABE to Compass, you would see those correlations, and they are rather old. So several states have approached us. Kentucky Community College System, Mississippi Community College System, Louisiana Community College System, all asking for us to update those correlations. We're also updating or doing a high school equivalency correlation. We've been asked by several states to look at correlations initially to level A, but most likely to level D and A. What is the correlated score on TABE to high school equivalency? So that is underway as well. That will be available probably a little sooner than the college placement study. This will probably finish up late summer, early fall, and have some data out. We've been collecting data with TASC states and also starting to do some GED and HiSET state data collection as well to do some correlations to TABE and to those high school equivalency exams. As I mentioned previously, we do have those webinars that happen on the third Thursday of every month. And if you need more information, there's a link on tabetest.com to add your email address. If you're not getting emails about the invitations, you can add your email address to get on the mailing list for that. I do want to point out before we wrap up and move to the question and answer that I went out to our website a few times. Tabetest.com is the key website to remember. You can get to all the resources by going to tabetest.com, and across the top of the menu there are resource tabs. There are tabs specific to TABE Class C or TABE Online that are available there. I will leave my contact information up on the screen, and we can move to go through some of the questions that have been posted to the chat menu. If there's anybody that has a question, you're welcome to type that into the chat menu as we go ahead and start to review some of those. And I will look at those here real quick and see what we have.
So Mike, we do have a couple in the question and answer, not in the chat, but it's on the question and answer.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Just a couple, but there are a lot in the chat, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to all of them, but we'll try.
Okay.
So I can read for you.
I have the question and answer one, so I'll go with the one from Sue McMillan about the pause button on the computer-based test, and the pause button is kind of a tricky question, but for TABE and for all tests on our Insight platform, the pause button is there for students to work with out touching the computer. So TABE and Insight as a platform is designed to protect the test content. So if a student was deciding to not take a test any longer and they just got up and left the testing center, at some point we want to make sure that we protect the test content and exit out of that test. So after a period of inactivity, that we have the test closed. What the pause button does is that it pauses that timer on inactivity. It does not pause the timer of the test. That's the important part that I'm trying to get to. So if a student hits pause, it allows them to work independently, and I think the best example of this is in high school equivalency or on a math test If they want to work on scratch paper, or they want to work on an essay on a piece of scratch paper without touching the keyboard, without touching the mouse, and they don't want the test to exit out due to inactivity, they can hit the pause button. The timer on the test will continue to run. So when they come back to the test, if they've been away for, working on a math problem for 10 minutes, they will have 10 minutes less on the test. So it's an important point to stress to the students that you can't hit pause and go to the bathroom and think that the timer stopped. It is there for a student to work away from the keyboard without the system timing out due to inactivity. Question, also, are calculators allowed on the math questions in the designated part 2 of the internet version? And yes, if a calculator is allowed on part 2 of the test, the calculator on the computer-based test, the calculator icon will be available for the students. So it is available on screen when it's allowed for part 2 of the test. And if the question then further asks about handheld calculators, if you are going to allow a handheld calculator during the computer portion of the test, the proctor has to have a much more active role to know when that student is in part 2 of the math test. That's why the calculator is built into the test, so that the proctor does not have to monitor when that student is between part 1 and part 2. Question about trigonometry on the math test. I don't believe there's trigonometry on TABE level math. I know we took it out of TASC, so I don't believe it is in TABE, but I'll have to double check and get back to if there is on that for that. I will leave the questions about the certificates and the PowerPoints to you, Liz, if you want to answer those.
Sure. Yeah, sorry. Oh my gosh. Yes, you meant right now.
No, either way.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, everybody. The certificate will be emailed within 24 hours. So just give it till tomorrow afternoon. And if you don't hear from us, then you can email me at coordinator@coabe.org. And the presentation will also be at coabe.org on our website under webinar resources. So that will probably be a couple days, maybe 2 days, 1 or 2 days. So that's that.
And there's a question about how is the individual profile created for students that take a paper and pencil test. If they take paper and pencil and you hand score, we do have a diagnostic profile that you can complete. That's a paper diagnostic profile that will give you similar results as the individual profile, but we highly recommend using the scanner. If you scan the answer sheet, you have access to the same exact individual profile that the computer-based test has access to. So hand scoring is a little bit more labor intensive because there are 2-part questions that you now have to figure out how to score. There are also unscored questions that you are not counting when you're scoring, so it is a lot easier for the small investment in the scanner with no cost to scan for software to have the image-based scanner to do the scanning for TABE 11 and 12. I think that's all the questions in the, and the question just popped in the question on scanning paper answer documents for 11 and 12. Will we have to scan the Locator answer documents in order to know the test levels? You can scan the Locator. You don't have to. I think that's the point, is that you can choose to scan, but you don't have to. You can always hand score if you want to.
So I think we should probably wrap it up. And so what can happen is I can email you the 2 reports. So if any questions were missed, we can review them. So we're at the top of the hour.
Sure, and if anybody wants to email me a question follow-up, they can email me directly as well too. That's not a problem.
Great, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
See you later, everyone.